would say in many ways you are the people who know me the best as a camera person. You have worked all with me multiple times. What's amazing to me is that you two have never met. So Judy Karp, who is a sound person who has worked with me all around the world, Wellington Bowler, who is a sound person who has worked with me all over the world, and you, Ginny Redeker, who have directed the projects that we have been the teams that you have chosen to work with. You brought us all together. And so, you know, from our various positions, director, camera person, sound person, there's been these different triangles that have been created. And I feel like you all know me in ways I don't know myself. So this feels like an opportunity for all of us to sort of share what is this work that we do collaboratively together and how it relates to Cameraperson.
I think what's interesting for me when I watch the film is that people ask me, oh, did you do sound for that, or did you do sound for that? And I know exactly if I did or if I didn't. What's interesting is because you use the parts that I most know about you, I feel like I was there. Like it's a totally seamless sort of audio experience for me. Like I recognize you in the movement, in the focus, in the detail. It's really great for me because it fills in the gaps where you were there, or you were there. And so then, but watching Cameraperson was like the scrapbook where you fill in the parts where I wasn't with you.
Right.
You know, I knew that you had worked with Kirsten a lot. When I see Cameraperson, I'm assuming if I wasn't there, you were there. So I was there for most of the newer stuff, meaning 8 years or so, and you were there for the older stuff.
I also had this role of sort of overall protection because I'm big, and invariably I would be the only man on the crew, and I did lots of things to establish relationships with people outside of our network to find out information. So when we traveled, you know, I always traveled with the drivers, or I would always eat with the drivers. And I did that so that I could understand the shoot from their perspective, and I could understand what is being said in the community about us. And I would just feather out. And so, for example, in Liberia, we would be on the street and lots of stuff was happening, and I would communicate with the drivers, and we had a language to say, gotta go. Right. And so then I would communicate to her. She knew I was doing that so she could relax, but I was never relaxed because I was protecting.
I remember once, but I think that it was you, we decided in Liberia that we would have anybody who ever said, time to go. That was it. We would just go. It wouldn't be like, what would you see? And because I totally remember a time that you two were down.
At the bridge?
At the bridge. And it was like, I looked around and I thought, oh, it's time to go.
You and I were talking that way because the drivers weren't there. And so it's a scene that's almost in the film, but it's not quite in the film. It's around the edges of the film. But we were in Liberia for Jenny's film, right? And some very interesting stuff was happening in a bridge, and I forgot. The bridge had some historical, it was like where they crossed in. And we put the camera down, and just imagine like all these little bands of people, men, young men, big, powerful guys. And then it started to get a little bit more organized. And you and I started talking like with our eyes. And Kirsten's just like shooting around, shooting.
I have no memory of
but
this.
It was just, it was kind of like, it was the sun, it was just like a bewitching hour. The sun was going down.
Yeah, the sun was going down.
It was and you were probably trying to get the last shot. It was really done. And we were just like, but it was good because it was a feeling of really being able to trust one another, of saying, we didn't have to ask why. It's just like, okay, it's time. And it's funny because of that experience, I've always said to people on all of my shoots, anytime anybody sees something that you feel makes you want to go, you don't have to explain it, just say time to go, we're out of here. Because it was good to be able to be that fast.
The final scene in Cameraperson comes from your film, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, that we shot together in Liberia. And that was a total discovery moment for me. It was the first time I've ever done that, where I was following one person, and then I saw another person coming, and it led to another person. And I remember how thrilled I was about shooting that. I was so excited. And then I remember feeling sad because I knew it could never be in the movie. Because I knew something like some cinema magic had happened, but it was not a part of your story.
Right. It's funny because when I saw it in the film, I thought, where'd that come from? I mean, I knew that it was from Liberia. I knew that it had to be from Pray the Devil Back to Hell.
Yeah.
But I had no idea. I said, wow, I don't remember that shot at all.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that day. It was so good.
That whole thing of knowing, of course, so many delicious things are not going to be in the film, but you don't know in the moment of filming it what's going to be in the film or not. And that not knowing of what the story is, but knowing when you're following something that's actually happening, I think is this intense pleasure that we all share together in many ways.
Well, you can't. I mean, it's also we might know what the story is, but you don't know which part of what you're filming is gonna actually lend itself to that story.
I mean, I think ultimately you want to serve the film. So when I was working for you, the ultimate goal is to get what you need for the edit room. And I don't know what that is, so there's a paranoia of get everything. And you can be disappointed, you can be happy, but that doesn't matter. The point is to sort of data acquisition. And then the secondary goal would be to protect her. To do that, you have to understand the tempo of the shoot, the motion of the shoot, the danger of the shoot. And you have to, as a technician, you have to protect for everything.
Yeah.
But you have to appreciate these little moments.
Well, we did a shot together, kind of like that, but different. We were in Bosnia, and we were with one of the rape victims, and we had given her a ride to the cemetery to put flowers on her son's graves and her husband's grave. And they left us at the front of the cemetery. Our intrusive fixer, translator, didn't come with us, and we just walked with her to the graves. We never told her to speed up, to slow down, to get a close-up. We just completely worked around her. And it was one of these moments that I take with me. And it was because of our relationship and because nobody else was with us to say, did you get it? Did you get it?
Well, and also I think the thing of, being in a position where we're asking people these, sort of go to the most hideous moment of your life. Tell us, what was it like for you in the genocide? What was it like to be raped? We're asking people these questions explicitly, which we'd already done with this woman, and there's such sort of obscenity and indignity to that, even when you're asking it with the most tenderness of purpose or, sort of political intent of hope of something can change. This moment with this woman, that was a very personal thing of saying to her, we're not with you only because we're filming you.
Right.
And if we had filmed her walking halfway and then stopped filming, it would be saying to her, you're doing this walk to the cemetery for us, for the camera, as opposed to, we are coming with you to acknowledge your loved ones. And I just remember that there was a certain moment where I was worried the producer was going to run up and stop us. And I think we were giving signals, sort of just back off, let us do this, full well knowing that length of shot will never be in the movie.
And we got it in 3 minutes.
Yeah, we already had the cutaway of the feet walking, but what mattered was us staying with her. And I think, that's what I always feel like with you, is that on the most fundamental level as humans that you're interested in, we're not just going in to get something, we're going in to try to connect with people and then think about these larger implications and how do we manage in all of these different spheres simultaneously, basically.
Well, and the reality is that you get the better shot that way.
Right.
Because if you stay with somebody, that they're not just performing for you, and they're able to be the emotional and you're just with them, then that's actually such a privilege that you get something that you wouldn't have gotten if they were just acting for you.
Yeah, and I think these are the things sort of that have weighed on me in the making of Cameraperson is I know that too. I know it's better for the movie, right? There's sort of these things that are happening where you know this is what I want to do as a human for another human, but it's also better for the movie, or it's not better for the movie, that all of those things are sort of going on simultaneously in your mind, and sometimes those are true conundrums.
So you bring up a point that I think you make a lot in the movie,
In Cameraperson.
In Cameraperson. That you have permission to shoot somebody, to record them, but that is not the whole of the relationship. Just because you've signed a release, there's another level of permission and taking care of it. And I think the woman in the cemetery, you had her permission to do whatever you wanted, but you created a new permission through witnessing. And then for a sound person, this is a lot easier for us because we simply disappear somehow, and we are respectful in our silence, that's taken that way. You get closer, your perspective is much closer, but I think this is a lot of the things that you were working on while you were filming, how to do that.
Or I think about when we were all in Morocco together, and we were filming a story about women who were becoming imams. And so all of them were like young, like 22-year-olds. They were all college graduates, and this one young woman granted us permission to film her. And she lived literally at the edge of the desert. So we traveled, I think, like 16 hours to get to where she was. But in the interim between the time that she had given us permission, another young woman that we had filmed with had gone on television and had been asked very political questions about what the role of the women were supposed to be in being imams. And so we got a call from the office of the Minister of Islamic Affairs that told us we were done. They didn't give us permission to shoot anything, and we had to leave the country. So here we were, we had traveled 16 hours, we were at the edge of the desert. This to me was like one of the reasons I really, really have always loved working with you, is because like, what do we do? Like I'm thinking, I gotta deliver a show in 6 weeks, I can't. And I remember taking a long walk with you that night, trying to figure out what should I do, what should I do, what should I do? And we decided, okay, Kristen pointed out, you know, even if we get away with it and they don't, and the Minister of Islamic Affairs hasn't notified them yet, we're going to get this girl in so much trouble if we film her. So let's not film her. And we decided to film the parents. And we got a great interview, and we never had to violate this woman's, you know, we didn't have to get her in trouble, and I still was able to deliver a film. To me, that's what I relate so much to in Cameraperson, because I feel like it's just full, like we all face constantly these ethical dilemmas on every level.
Your trip was the beginning of a deep exploration for me about conflict, about resolution of conflict, and about giving yourself permission to be alive. In Darfur now, you know, when we heard that kid singing, and the translation of that is the sins that are taking place today will be accounted for later. So you have a 10-year-old kid in a refugee camp praying a Quranic verse that's saying, you will not get away with this. And we knew something powerful was happening. And the director didn't feel this because of whatever reason. He wasn't moved in the same way. He thought it was beautiful. And then, and it's in the movie, you see the two women.
Yeah. And we could hear the sound of the chopping.
We could hear the sound of the chopping. You can't hear it in the film, but we could hear it. And you looked at me and I was like, yeah, but we sat for a good minute. I recorded a lot of that.
We went first by ourselves. He wanted to go in a different direction, and we were pulling in these two different directions in a way.
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, because I mean, he had asked to get them in the background.
This is a camp in Zilinji.
So if we can get him in the foreground and those women chopping down the tree in the background.
And then can we get them in the foreground? And I felt really strongly like I want to see them in the foreground. I want to hear what's going on with them, because you could sort of see them having a good time chopping down this tree in the middle of the desert, which was total insanity. There were no trees, and they were chopping down this tree. One of the things that I love about its inclusion in the film is that we do hear Izzadine, the translator, sort of trying to fill us in as it's happening.
Because he said they called them bastards.
And you're, in some ways, trying to give signals to him to say, We need to get this sound clean. We know they're saying something important. Don't tell us what it is now. You know, so that dance of
like
trying
we
to
want to know,
protect
but we
the
don't need to
sound
know.
for the recording. That's right.
There are these moments in time where you do not know if it's going to be in the film, but you know that this is going to mark me.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's really not about the film. It's really, this is going to mark me
This
Because
is
you recognize that it's a
because
significant
How
moment.
important it was.
in my life. And in my documentary, like not the one that anyone's going to see, but in my experience.
I think the baby story is cut so beautifully in Cameraperson, and you get it. You know, you really get what happened, and you feel it. We followed the story to its very sad conclusion over days, and it was our job to follow the story. We really wanted to follow the story. We felt really connected to the family. And yet, did we do the family a disservice by following it through to the end and having details that they may not want on camera? You know, there were all these issues that came up about that.
What film was that?
Don Shapiro's film about maternal health in Nigeria called The Edge of Joy.
Look at the baby looking. Ai da ta tsaya ma ba ta karu ba, amma fa baby tabarkallah, masha Allah.
You know, when you talk about the moment of the women chopping the trees in Darfur, that it was, you knew while it was happening that it was going to mark you. Judy and I knew that that moment was marking us in the moment, but I don't think there's any way in which either of us realized how much we've been marked by those days of filming in that hospital. I mean, we've been struggling with that situation since we left it.
I've written about it, and it's almost a punchline and a joke. Because, you know, when you go into a hospital in the United States, there's so much you have to sign, and you have a watcher with you every second, and everything is like, you know, ethically correct and this and that. In Nigeria, the only instruction we got from the head of the hospital, who was a wonderful man, was you're not allowed to show vaginas. Yeah. Everything else was fair game. You know, it was like nothing, people don't have to sign releases, there are no permissions, you know, you can like poke your head in and do everything that you want to do as long as you don't show a vagina. And it was like, you know, the experience was like so much deeper than that and so much more profound than that. And it was like, you know, what people have permission, who has agency, who can say no to us. Yeah. And all of those were playing out the whole time.
And there's the moment where the grandmother has to transport the baby from one unit to another because the hospital workers weren't allowed to go between units. And I ran to get in front of her to walk backwards, and she stopped because she thought she had to stop and pose for me. And it was urgent that she get the baby. And it was, you know, this most profound story of agency, right? She thinks, as a Nigerian woman from the country, that because I'm there, a white woman with a camera, she has to do what I tell her to do, even though it's this moment of complete urgency for her and her grandson. And those are just the moments where you're just devastated by these unspoken things about who you are and what you're up to. Because obviously, you know, I got out of the way and said, run, 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 you know, but she thought she had to stop for me because of the power dynamics. I did not understand how marked I was by the things that we have shot together and that I've shot with other people. I did not understand it. And I only learned it through the filmmaking process. And I'm sort of curious in some ways what each of you knew that I didn't know.
I was pretty shocked when you said that you thought you shot a film about blueberries, a scene about blueberries in Bosnia, because that was so incredibly traumatic. And you were very, very traumatized while making it because we would have conversations every day.
Well, I think, you know, that moment of filming with that family, we sort of knew that it wasn't going to be used in the film.
Right? Yeah.
But we needed it. We needed to stay there in that place that felt beautiful, where the food was delicious and the people were kind, because that was not what we were experiencing anywhere else. And it was so relentless, and the sort of the violent pressure of the situation was so great that we were not able to leave. And then it's amazing to me that what my mind did was it said to me, stay in that place.
When we were going to Nigeria, and the film is maternal mortality, it's, you know, point blank. It's not like, well, we're going to film blah, 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 and childbirth and blah, blah, blah. And you were saying, right after this, I'm going to try to get pregnant. And it was like, okay. And then I remember the first day in the maternity ward where there's like blood all over the floor. You know, it wasn't even about people dying, it's just about giving birth. And the first thing he said to me, because we were supposed to come back for like a second round of shooting, he said, I think if I'm pregnant, I'm not coming back here. And that was like, all we allowed ourselves were, oh my God, you know, we're here to do a job. We're not here to deal with ourselves and our safety and everything. But I just remember that moment as, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And what are you doing trying to get...
Yeah, and I remember you saying in Darfur that you noticed like certain shots I couldn't hold as long as we got, like my mother literally died the day after we got back from Darfur, after 7 years of Alzheimer's, and you were noticing I couldn't hold shots as long as I used to be able to. That, you know, really emotional situations, I couldn't handle it anymore, even though I wasn't saying, my mother's dying and I can't, I'm up to here with emotion. I couldn't hold the shots. So part of the desire to make Cameraperson was to open up this evidence of the sort of multiplicity of minds and bodies that are present when we make films.
There's a neat way in which you're traveling and you are a Western person. So you're trying to see things like you're from there, but you have this lens, and I think, you know, that's really apparent in the film. Like, you're struggling with a Western paradigm, but you're also shooting it.
Like the little boy with the axe in the film. I mean,
it's such an interesting moment. The little boy with the axe, right?
Everybody loves that. I mean,
everybody loves that, and it was so funny when I showed it in Bosnia. Everyone was like, "Why is this in the movie?" Like, all toddlers learn to use axes in Bosnian countryside, and there was a way in which we both were knowing and seeing that too. Like, you see the older kid grip the axe and make sure it's like back in the stump, older, so, right? You know. But also, we're discovering it in the moment and trying to figure out, is it going to be okay, or is this going to be a bad moment for everybody involved? Oh, jeez.
So you shoot it and you're nervous that the kid's going to hurt himself, but at the same time, you don't interfere. So there's this trusting of the moment. You didn't say anything.
I thought it was interesting that you were talking about the ethical dilemmas of what you face. With you, I think about like being in the edit room for Pray the Devil Back to Hell, and literally spending 3 solid weeks of looking at war footage of just the worst kind of stuff. You start to get like
I remember
post-traumatic stress. I mean, it's kind of like really, really awful. And all the time trying to make decisions. Well, I'm not going to put this in the film. And the question of like, when you said like, oh, does a body get in the film? I mean, how do you give agency even to someone who's been killed? I mean, how do you just try to always...
You made a really strong decision about that with Pray the Devil Back to Hell. After seeing all that really graphic, violent footage, you said, I'm not putting desecrated bodies in the film.
Because I mean, I think to me, I feel like, how would I feel about myself being represented like that? How would I feel about being reduced to what horror someone had done to me?
You know, these ethical dilemmas are hidden in the documentary world by necessity in certain ways, and then
Permissions and trauma.
Yeah, permissions and trauma, those are hidden conversations.
But you feel like it's hidden from whom?
From the public, from the audience, from the people we make films with, from each other.
I mean, even what we're talking about now is the stuff that no one talks about and no one knows.
Right.
It's in a documentary.
Because of their work at scale, they understand things. They never get a chance to share it because they're always out working.
Yeah.
I don't get to share. I mean, I can't tell you the discussions I've had with camera people since making this film. I don't ever get to talk to them because we're all out working all the time, right? So I think there's a lot of unspoken stories.
And we're negotiating these things.
Or in Morocco, the story that I told about like the woman who we filmed with. No, okay, so we can't film the characters I thought we were going to film. That's no longer. So, okay, let me film an interview with a guy who's trying to kick me out of the country. Let me get an interview with the Minister of Islamic Affairs. Okay, you don't want me to talk to somebody else? Let me talk to you. You tell me about it.
It's a great moment.
It was really, do that? Yes, but it was interesting because I had some unbelievable strings I was able to pull that he had to concede to doing an interview with us, which is something he really did not want to do. And I think that I treated him really fairly. I thought that I treated him very fairly in the film, and I thought that he had an interesting perspective. But the team, the local producers that I worked with, were then banned after we left. Were banned. The Minister of Islamic Affairs basically went after them for years, and they had a really, really hard time.
Right.
They've never been able to film certain things again. And it was kind of like, so talk about the wake that you leave behind.
Well, I actually met Abdul Henderson yesterday. So he's the young soldier who's talking to Michael Moore in Cameraperson, and I asked him, what was that experience of being filmed, and he had actually never. It is the moment on camera is the first moment that he thinks and says, I'm not going back to Iraq.
Are you expected to be called back?
I believe so. Our commanding officer has said it's not about if, it's when.
Mm-hmm. And are you going to go back?
No.
You're not?
No.
He's in uniform, he's still in the military, and he said he can see the pause in the film where he suddenly realizes, I was engaged to be married, my fiance was pregnant, and I just said, I'm not going back, and I'm still in the military, and I've just been filmed by Michael Moore.
To Michael Moore.
Yeah, and to Michael's credit, he said, he lawyered him up and got him in touch with Charles Ogletree from Harvard, and there was a letter that came out later to his unit that said, deployment for the next mission is voluntary. And basically, they gave him a pass because they knew how public it would be if he was going to. So the power of the two forces of, operating against each other is pretty strong.
It's a positive wake.
Wow,
Yeah, it's a positive wake. Or, someone is in a disempowered situation and somehow the work of filming them gives them more power. Mm-hmm. If he had just done that as an individual, he would have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because he did it publicly and with the support of Michael Moore and Fahrenheit did what it did, he then had power on his side that he would not have had. So it's,
Yeah, I'm also thinking as you guys are talking that it's interesting because as the director, I see the story from the beginning, from the first time I thought about the story, from who I'm going to cast in the story, from how, all the situations, but I also see it all the way through to the end and the edit room. And it's interesting that you guys maybe will have a moment of something that really impacts you that is like one part of a...
Totally.
It's like the whole experience for you, it's like one part of something for me.
Yeah.
It's really...
Well, and I think in some ways, because we're there in that present moment and we don't have the responsibility of finishing the film, bringing it out into the world, representing it, being the one who gets lawyers for people if they need them, then we're even sort of freer in some ways to make these emotional connections. But then we often realize in the moment, we're generating this kind of energy of emotional openness, but it then may put someone in a position of incredible vulnerability. And is the director in a position to be responsible with that? And not, none of us can know that in a certain way.
Do you act differently on that level with different directors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
You're at this table.
Yeah. Here you are. Right. But many times we don't know, I work a lot and I get called by people that I don't know to do projects I don't know anything about. And there's a level at which I always feel out of control, like I never know how things are going to be used. So many times it's really ambiguous as to whether they're going to use it for good or not. Are they going to make this person look okay? Are they going to respect their wishes?
Well, I think when you work with people that you really trust, like all of us are in relation to each other, it's a sense of we all know we're operating with blind spots, and that's necessary to do our job, and we all have each other's peripheral vision and each other's backs, basically, is what's happening.
Like a lot of times, Kirsten will be shooting something important and I'll be booming it, or the mics are on, and the director will come to me because there's something completely extraneous, not nearly, in terms of what I think their film is, not nearly as important or compelling. And I feel like I'm the one who has to be, wait, just a minute, let her get the shot. Because we've gotten 5 shots of the scene, but until we get the punchline, it's not going to cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super good point, because when you're directing, and I have some experience directing now, time speeds up a little bit. And image making time speeds up, especially when things are happening, but sound is a constant 24 frames a second. It's a little slower. And often it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility to just hold that beat, to make sure that you don't have to cut out in the edit room.
And I would say I absolutely credit you both with me learning to listen a little bit better. You both know in many ways that I don't always listen. And sometimes I don't wear my headphones, or I'm like disconnected from what's happening with the sound. But it's been, over the years, the building of respect of how much you're taking in, how much you understand about what's happening, and the way that you have gathered that information, for me, has been this revelation of how critical it is to listen, and it's really changed the way I shoot, I think, over time. I don't know if you can speak to that.
I yelled at her.
Well, we just had something this week.
I totally.
You yelled at her,
totally-
you yell at each other. And
I totally. You've never heard me yell.
No.
and I go, wear your headphones.
Yeah.
But just
When I met her, she wouldn't wear
she wouldn't
headphones.
wear them. Well, gradual. I guess both of us tag team. Bad cop, is that it?
I love this. I love this.
Bad cop.
Yeah, no, I literally told her, like, you don't respect what I do if you do this.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what I'm listening for. And I'm trying to protect the film as much as you.
You know, just even listening to the two of you talk, you change the energy, you change the tempo. And when I film, I get in a zone, and I'm pretty fast twitch and intense, and I'm like committed to something. And then all of a sudden, just to hear either of you there as powerfully as you are, and sort of with the complex understandings that both of you have of the situation, then I remember to change my perspective.
But I'm like looking, okay, they've got that covered. I see that you're covering that, and I'm looking at what else is happening around the room. What's coming?
Yeah.
I mean, that's me like when there's all this talk about like one-man bands or like one-woman band that you're supposed to do shooting and sound and directing. Like, how can? Like, one of the things I really do think is happen when you're shooting, you're like this, you're just totally focused on this. You cannot possibly see what's happening.
But good sound
around
people is that window. So what I learned with the style that I picked up from you is because your eyes would light up, and Kirsten's shooting, and you don't want to bother her, and I would be looking, because good camera people are very focused on what they're doing, like these guys here. Good sound people are looking at everybody. And it's visual.
One of the things that's always just amazing to me is when I will, I'll suddenly need to run, and we're often tethered by a very short cable. We're actually attached to people as human beings.
The old days.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're doing...
Morocco, we were tethered.
Yeah, we're often, sometimes we're working wirelessly, but we need to stay together. Yeah. And there'll be times when I'll be, suddenly something is happening, and seconds before I begin to move, you both begin to move. So that thing of knowing, sort of where I am about to go, what I am about to do, even before I know what I'm about to do, is one of these things that I think is so revelatory about the collaboration.
I remember once doing a shoot with somebody who had done more narrative work, and we were shooting something on the street, and the police came up and started to hassle us, and he stopped filming. I'm thinking, what are you, nuts? I'll go take care. I mean, like you guys would know that you would just keep shooting, and I'll go deal with the police. So you keep shooting as long as you can until you can't shoot anymore. Right. And but like it's like, whoa, no, stop just because of that,
Well, having this really versatile relationship to power is part of what being a documentarian is.
What do you mean by versatile relationship?
Well,
to power?
like
You get guns pointed at you.
Do I keep filming while the guns are being pointed? Do I stop? Do I keep going? Those are constant calculations.
Somebody tells you to stop, in your normal life, you might.
Totally.
Right. And I mean,
totally. You would.
Right. And someone asked me, how did you do that shot of James Wilkins when he comes back from losing the boxing match? And obviously he's going to come down the corridor. What's not obvious is he goes into the locker room. Earlier in my career, I would have followed him in and gotten thrown out, I'm sure. At another earlier point in my career, I would have turned the camera off. But I just stopped and waited at that place for him to come back out, because I knew I have all the time in the world and he's coming back out.
Don't touch me! Don't fucking touch me! This fight ain't over.
And that's your relationship to power, to know, don't push it that far, stay and wait for it, push it now.
Because you stop, and it's just the right amount in the room.
Yeah.
so that you're not then having this long backwards movement to get back out. It's like just a little bit in, and then you just come.
And I keep on thinking I want to email the sound person on that because
Roger Phoenix.
Roger, I know. I was going to say it's
sound
Roger
person.
Phoenix, and he did such a wonderful job. He
Such a
got
good
the
job.
mother line,
Which makes the scene.
which makes the whole scene.
Yeah.
What? I'm going to talk to my mother. What?
No, remember,
But it's
he's
like-
behind, right?
But-
So he's got to get to this angle
Right.
where he
No, I
can get
know
that. So
all of
because you
that.
come through the
I
through
know
the
all of
gate,
that. And
he's
his
got to see it
pole
before she
has to be
sees it.
high enough so that the pole's not cutting the frame.
He's
You
got to know the payoff
right.
is coming,
I mean, it
and
was
he's
like-
got to physically get there.
You did a great job. Look at me. You should have had that. Don't get mad. There's a lot of people watching.
Right. I mean, we did great work, but like that's the shot where I go, oh my God, he's a genius. You know, it's like-
That was a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much
I
harder
mean,
than what
not
I
that
did.
your work's not great, but it was like one of those, really putting myself in the position if I were on that shoot, I very likely would not have gotten that because I would have not wanted to be in the shot. It's just like seeing the choices that people make.
And it's funny, I didn't realize until making this film how much I value the physicality of the labor. I value so much the emotional part of it and the intellectual part of it and the artistic, creative visions of it, sort of this world, the ethereal world. But I really value the joy of getting to, ride in the back of a pickup truck in the country or climb on top of something or, be in the middle of a bunch of people when they're dancing. I enjoy the physicality. And I honestly like the way that connects me to people in the world who do physical labor, because I feel like there's such a distinction between the people who do mind work and body work, and it's like it is one of the few places where those are all being asked for in the most demanding ways.
The power of documentary is it's this artifice that's set up to capture these things, and the artistry and the brilliance that we bring to it is that those moments actually happen. You hear parts of the truth. You hear parts of what it's like to be human from different facets. And this is when the camera's rolling and what people see. And as your film points out, it's happening, beyond the margins of the cinema. And that's what's powerful in your film, and that's what's powerful in our lives. Because those interviews, regardless of whether you used them in Pray the Devil Back to Hell, they're right here.
Right. We all heard them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have a responsibility to keep them alive. That it's a contract.
We could look at all evidence of the horror in the world and the injustice in the world and be like, I'm done, I'm out, as a human being. But in fact, there's all this joy and discovery and pleasure and just, mind-boggling wonder that happens all the time. In so many ways, I feel like in the same way we get surprised as by being human, by our own humanity, documentary surprises you again with the joy you have in life and the respect you have for other people.